At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu. At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
You've probably heard of the Cecil Hotel. It's been the backdrop for more tragedy than a season of Dateline. Serial killers, unsolved deaths, people disappearing in plain sight. But there's one room they don't put on the brochure. The staff avoids it, the guests flee, and the hotel pretends it doesn't even exist. Today, we're going there. Welcome to Room 641. The Cecil Hotel started with such promise. Built in 1924, it was supposed to be elegant and welcoming, a nice place for business travelers and tourists visiting Los Angeles. You can still see hints of that original vision in the marble lobby and ornate staircase. But that dream didn't survive very long. The Great Depression changed everything. The neighborhood started going downhill, and the Cecil went with it. What happened next turned it into something no hotel ever wants to become. By the 1940s and 50s, the Cecil had become a magnet for tragedy. People killed themselves there. Others overdosed. Some died violently in ways that were never fully explained. This was more than bad luck. It was more a pattern, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud. The newspapers would report these deaths with just a few sentences, and most victims were quickly forgotten. But the stories piled up. Guests would check in and never check out. Staff would discover bodies in rooms, stairwells, even in the alley outside. Eventually, the hotel's reputation became impossible to ignore. Locals started calling it Suicide Hotel. People said the place felt heavy the moment you walked through the doors. Something about it just wasn't right. In the 1980s, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived there while terrorizing California. He came and went like any other guest. A few years later, serial killer Jack Unterweger also stayed at the Cecil while murdering women in the area. Both chose this hotel out of all places they could have stayed. That's not a coincidence. That's a disturbing pattern that's been building for decades. The Cecil has seen more death and mystery than most places ever will. And somewhere in all this darkness, there are certain rooms where the stories run even deeper. Rooms the hotel quietly removed from their listings. Rooms with histories nobody wants to discuss. Room 641 is one of those rooms. Most of the stories about the Cecil focus on what's already been made public. Cases that hit the headlines, the names that became synonymous with the hotel's dark legacy. But there's one room that rarely gets mentioned. It's not famous, but the people who've stayed there remember it. So do the ones who worked there. Room 641 doesn't show up on travel blogs or ghost hunting YouTube videos. It's not part of the official tour. But the people who have encountered it firsthand say something is wrong with it. Former employees say they hated cleaning that room. Some refused to go in alone. Others asked to be transferred off the floor entirely. They didn't all agree on what they experienced, but they all agreed on one thing. It didn't feel normal. Guests have reported hearing voices in the walls, phones ringing with no one on the other end, and lights turning on and off without explanation. One couple claimed they were woken in the middle of the night to a loud bang, like someone had kicked the door from the inside, and when they turned on the light, the room was empty. Another guest said she felt like she was being watched the entire time she was there. She left after one night, cutting her trip short with no refund. The front desk didn't ask questions. There are no official records tying 641 to anything violent. No police reports, no fire, no death certificates. But in a building where tragedy is part of the architecture, it's the silence around this room that makes it feel louder. Maybe it's just another room in an old hotel. Or maybe there's a reason it's never been renovated, never reassigned, never erased. Sometimes a place just feels wrong, and you can't put your finger on why. You walk into a room and instantly feel on edge, cold, anxious, like something's crawling under your skin. Nothing's moving, nobody's there, but every instinct you have is screaming at you to leave. Paranormal investigators have a name for this: residual energy. Think of it as an emotional echo that gets trapped in a place after something terrible happens. And if that's real, then the Cecil Hotel has been collecting those echoes for almost 100 years. The location doesn't help. The Cecil sits right in the heart of an area that's seen generations of poverty, addiction, and violence. Some researchers think places like that actually absorb human suffering, not in some mystical way, but physically, like the walls soak it up and hold on to it. The very air becomes heavy with it. Room 641 seems to be ground zero for whatever is happening there. Investigation teams who have spent time in that room describe getting hit with sudden, splitting headaches or waves of nausea. Some feel completely drained, like something's pulling the energy right out of them. The equipment tells its own stories. Electromagnetic field detectors go crazy in spots where there's no electrical source nearby. Audio recordings pick up what sound like whispered voices in a room that's supposed to be empty and locked at night. Then there are things you can see. Cold spots that seem to drift around the room like they have a mind of their own. Shadows appearing in photos where there's nothing there to cast those shadows. One team swears a flashlight turned itself on while sitting on the floor, stayed lit for exactly 5 seconds, then clicked off by itself. Nobody can agree on what's causing it all. Some say it's genuine paranormal activity. Others think it's all psychological, that people go in expecting something weird, so their minds create something weird. But there's another theory that's harder to dismiss, that room 641 has absorbed so much trauma over the years that the space itself has changed. All that pain and fear has nowhere to go, so it just sits there, waiting. Whatever the explanation, one thing's clear. Room 641 doesn't feel empty, even when it is. It feels like something's still happening in there, something that doesn't care whether anyone's around to witness it or not. You know what's really unsettling about room 641? It's not just the strange experiences people report. It's how the Cecil Hotel handles, or doesn't handle, what happens there. Former employees have described how that room was treated differently from the others. It would disappear from the reservation system for weeks or months at a time, with no explanation and no out-of-order notices. But then suddenly it would be back in the rotation, and unsuspecting guests would find themselves assigned to the room that staff actively avoided. When guests did complain about the unusual experiences, the hotel's response was always the same: dismissive and brief. People might get transferred to another floor if they pushed hard enough, but that was it. No follow-up questions, no incident reports, no apparent interest in understanding what was happening. According to one former desk clerk who spoke anonymously, room 641 was sometimes reserved for what the hotel called problem guests, people who were desperate for accommodation, unlikely to complain, or might not have clear memories of their stay, if you know what I'm saying. These arrangements never made it to the official booking records, but they left their mark in other ways. What's particularly strange is the complete absence of official documentation. No police reports are tied to room 641. No documented incidents appear in any public records. This seems odd considering how frequently guests have reportedly left early or requested security assistance. Either nothing was formally reported or those reports were quietly buried. In a place with the Cecil's long and troubled history, not every story becomes part of the official record. Some incidents get covered up, others are simply denied, and some, like whatever happens in room 641, seem to vanish entirely from documented history. The silence speaks volumes. The hotel may refuse to acknowledge any problems, but guests keep emerging from that room with the same haunted expression: confused, drained, deeply unsettled by something they struggle to articulate. Whatever's happening in room 641, the evidence suggests it's still going on. The hotel's determined silence might be the most telling part of the story. Maybe room 641 doesn't need a headline story. Maybe the point is it just keeps slipping through the cracks. No blood on the walls, no body in the bed, just a feeling that something's wrong and nobody wants to deal with it. In a hotel packed with documented tragedies, this room stays quiet, but not peaceful. It feels unfinished. You have to wonder, can a place hold on to everything that's happened inside it and never let go? All that desperation and fear build up for decades until the air itself feels heavy? Room 641 is still there. The door still locks. Someone could check in tonight without knowing any of this. They'd walk in expecting just another cheap hotel room. But the room would remember. It always does. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Mystery. I'm Joe, the host, and honestly, room 641 might be the most disturbing part of the Cecil Hotel's entire dark history. And that's saying something. Think about it. A room so horrific with such a reputation that the hotel staff tries to pretend like it doesn't exist. Whatever happened in there was bad enough that they'd rather lose rental income than deal with it. In a place that's seen serial killers, suicides, and every kind of tragedy you can imagine, what possibly could be worse than all of that? The fact that we'll probably never know the truth just makes it a little more unsettling. Sometimes the stories we don't get to hear are the ones that could keep us up at night. Hey, if you're into darker stories, you can check out my other podcast. It's about true crime. It's called 10-Minute Murder. You can also go to 10minutemurder.com for more information about it and to contact me. Until next time, stay curious and maybe avoid hotels with a serial killer past. Or don't, See you next time.